The case of Ana Rosa Barrera. Ana Rosa Barrera was a 40-year-old woman. She lived in a commune in the Santa Maria department near Córdoba City, in the province of Córdoba, Argentina. People close to her described Ana Rosa as courageous and adventurous, someone who was not afraid to start over and move forward with determination. Reports indicate that Ana Rosa lived in a tent for 4 years, although the reasons for this remain unclear. She worked at the Secretariat for Children, Adolescents, and Families in Córdoba, a job she truly enjoyed. Additionally, she and her partner, Marcelo Fabio Ferretto, ran an upholstery workshop together. They met when Ana Rosa began working for Marcelo's business. By 2017, Ana Rosa and Marcelo had been in a 10-year relationship. They shared a common interest in Reiki, a practice involving the use of the palms to promote physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. Despite this shared interest, they still experienced problems in their relationship. Ana Rosa and Marcelo each had 4 children from previous relationships. Regarding Ana Rosa's family, her parents, brothers, and sisters all resided in Córdoba. Marcelo, on the other hand, was a wallpaper maker with a workshop near their home. People close to them described Marcelo as jealous and controlling, which annoyed Ana Rosa. On Sunday, May 28th, they visited relatives in Villa Lend, but the trip was marred by a heated argument sparked by Marcelo checking Ana Rosa's phone. The argument continued at their home, with neighbors hearing them shout and insult each other until the early hours of Monday morning. Later that day, Marcelo reported Ana Rosa missing to the police, although the exact timing of the report is disputed in media accounts. Most reports agree that Marcelo filed the report at the 18th police station on Tuesday, May 30th. According to Marcelo, he claimed to have woken up at 6 a.m. on Monday to find Ana Rosa already gone, which he found unusual since she typically rose early to feed their dogs before leaving the house. He repeated this account to both the police and the media. Marcelo stated that he last saw Ana Rosa on Sunday night and again Monday night before going to bed. According to some sources, Marcelo realized something was wrong when Ana Rosa's colleagues called him to ask about her absence, knowing she would never miss work without a valid reason. Marcelo recounted the events leading up to her disappearance, saying that on Monday he came across Ana Rosa's white Chevrolet while running an errand at the local pharmacy. Not long after, police discovered an abandoned car on Rainier Avenue outside a beauty salon in the Santa Isabel neighborhood. The location was about halfway between their home and Ana Rosa's workplace. Inside the car were her belongings and keys, but her cell phone was missing. According to Marcelo, he tried to contact her, and their friends and children also left messages, but no one received a response. The last message Ana Rosa sent via WhatsApp was at 10:40 p.m. on Sunday, May 28th. Ana Rosa's relatives all stated that the circumstances surrounding her disappearance were unclear. Marcelo has maintained regular contact with police since filing the report and has also attempted to locate Ana Rosa through social media and news outlets. In an interview with reporters, Marcelo shared Ana Rosa's plans on the day she went missing, which included an early morning swim at a gym and a scheduled appointment with a doctor. Marcelo emphasized that his primary concern was Ana Rosa's safe return home. Prosecutor Legendro Peralta Tinalo of Altagracia assumed control of the case, and the investigation commenced. Multiple theories were initially proposed, including the possibility that Ana Rosa was a victim of kidnapping, robbery, or revenge. The option that she had left voluntarily was also considered. As part of the investigation, Marcelo testified for over 14 hours on Wednesday, May 31st. However, his statements became increasingly inconsistent, raising suspicions among investigators. Marcelo's claims generated suspicion among detectives due to inconsistencies and his shifting demeanor. Initially, he was confident and gave frequent interviews, but later he emphasized his innocence, providing unsolicited details and justifying himself by discussing his relationship with Ana Rosa. As time passed, Ana Rosa's loved ones became increasingly desperate due to the lack of progress in the search. Meanwhile, the investigative authorities persisted in their efforts to solve the case. The prosecutor leading the investigation was convinced that Marcelo was withholding information and urged investigators to scrutinize him more thoroughly. On Friday, June 2nd, during another meeting with police officers, Marcelo's demeanor shifted. He became more composed. However, when detectives presented data from cell phone towers that contradicted his alibi, Marcelo became dismayed and ultimately revealed the truth. He admitted to killing Ana Rosa, running her over, and then dismembering her body to dispose of the evidence. After confessing to the brutal crime, Marcelo revealed the location of Ana Rosa's dismembered body. Following Marcelo's confession, police, aided by a canine unit, found Ana Rosa's remains at approximately 2:30 p.m. in a hole dug by Marcelo on a dirt road in the countryside near a factory. The location was familiar to Marcelo, as he frequently visited the area for work-related purposes. It became clear that Marcelo's previous statements were false, except for his mention of a quarrel that occurred early Monday morning. According to the reconstructed events, Marcelo and Ana Rosa had been arguing throughout the weekend before she went missing. Marcelo's intense jealousy sparked the violence. In the heat of the argument, Marcelo used a sledgehammer to strike Ana Rosa multiple times until she died. He then attempted to put her body in the car but failed. Instead, he used a knife to dismember her body. He placed Ana Rosa's remains in the car and began transporting them to her burial site. After pleading guilty, authorities conducted a search of the defendant's home on Friday, where they discovered various tools, including machetes and knives of different sizes. Marcelo was then arrested and faced charges of capital murder, a crime that could carry a sentence of life in prison. Prosecutor Peralta Adama explained that the defendant's statement, in which he took responsibility for the crime, was not considered a formal confession. Instead, the record shows that he admitted to the crime during an interview as a witness. A formal statement will be made in the coming days once sufficient evidence is gathered to support the charges. This evidence will include the final autopsy report, forensic analysis of vehicles and items recovered during searches, and the results of luminol tests. Marcelo's lawyer, Jose Luis Saca, stated that the police statement carried no legal weight and could not be used as evidence. Furthermore, the defense announced that the defendant would not testify. Over the weekend, investigations continued, and on June 5th, the preliminary autopsy report was released. The report concluded that Ana Rosa's cause of death was severe head trauma. On June 9th, it was discovered that luminol tests had been conducted at the home where Ana Rosa and Marcelo lived. The tests revealed that a large amount of blood had been cleaned up. Medical examiners also uncovered additional details during the autopsy, including knife cuts on the victim's extremities. A cut measuring 18 centimeters long and 7 centimeters deep was found on the victim's neck, reaching the cervical region. Based on these findings, the prosecutor's office charged Marcelo with double aggravated murder. Almost 2 years after Ana Rosa's murder, Marcelo's trial began. The prosecution explained the severity of the charges to the jury. According to the autopsy results, Ana Rosa suffered a severe initial blow to the face, which left her unconscious, followed by multiple blows to the head that crushed her skull. At the first hearing, Marcelo chose to remain silent. The court then heard testimony from witnesses. Deborah Territorios, Ana Rosa's daughter, testified that after her mother began dating Marcelo, she became increasingly distant from her children and other family members. Deborah stated that she and her father moved to a different city, followed by her older siblings, which made it more difficult to communicate with their mother. However, when Deborah spent time alone with her mother, Ana Rosa was loving and caring. Yet whenever Marcelo was present, her mother would pull away. Deborah even had to leave her mother's house quickly on occasion because Marcelo was expected to arrive soon. Ana Rosa's cousin, Roberto Enrique Reina, also testified. He witnessed their argument on May 28, 2017, which began at his house. According to Roberto, the argument started when Marcelo saw a message on Ana Rosa's phone. The prosecutor's indictment highlighted Marcelo's control over Ana Rosa, including a power imbalance in their relationship and objectifying her in front of others. Fernando, a co-worker and friend of the victim, Ana Rosa, explained that after she began dating Marcelo, she initially grew distant from everyone but later tried to reconnect. Fernando added that Marcelo seemed to imitate Ana Rosa's actions, even taking Reiki classes shortly after learning that she was also attending. According to the indictment, Ana Rosa told a friend that after beginning energy harmonization therapy, she felt better and was able to improve her relationships with family members. She had also planned to visit her son in Bolivia. However, as Ana Rosa's life improved, Marcelo became increasingly aggressive. Fernando reported that Marcelo once lashed out when Ana Rosa said women with positive attitudes could achieve their goals, calling women idiots who would end up dying in a ditch. On the second day of the hearing, Claudio Bustamante, the the police officer who took Marcelo's statement, testified. He informed the jury that Marcelo had spontaneously confessed during the interrogation without any pressure from him. According to Bustamante, Marcelo stated that Ana Rosa had told him on Monday that she was no longer satisfied with him and was cheating on him, which angered Marcelo and prompted him to hit her, although he could not recall what he had used to strike her. On April 11th, the 11th Criminal Court's jury delivered its verdict, finding Marcelo Fabio Fair guilty of the murder of Ana Rosa Barrera. The sentence was life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 35 years, conditional on good behavior. Upon hearing the verdict, Ana Rosa's relatives burst into tears and shouted at Marcelo, labeling him a murderer and wishing him to spend the rest of his life in prison. The prosecutor in charge of the case stated that the jury's decision aligned with the prosecution's request. The evidence demonstrated that Marcelo Fabio Fair had acted with full awareness and premeditation in planning Ana Rosa's murder. According to the prosecution, Marcelo's attempt to appear mentally unstable at the time of the crime was a tactic to evade the maximum sentence. Moving on to the next case. The case of Andrea Lohegin. Andrea Lohegin was born on January 6, 1977, in Bad Belzig, Germany, into a close-knit family that included her mother, father, and sister. They lived in a newly constructed residential complex. As children, Andrea and her sister were regarded as obedient and hardworking in their studies, which made their parents deeply proud. By the time Andrea reached 16, she had become a striking young woman and an excellent student, attracting many admirers. Andrea and her sister primarily dedicated themselves to their schoolwork and spending time with friends at parties, steering clear of any improper or troubling behaviors. On October 7, 1993, during the autumn break, 16-year-old Andrea spent the day with her parents at a local shopping center. With just 1 year of high school remaining, Andrea stood on the verge of an important milestone, looking forward to finishing her exams and beginning her transition into adulthood. Andrea held aspirations of attending university, pursuing a career, and eventually starting a family of her own. The idea of entering this new chapter of her life filled her with tremendous excitement and anticipation. During their outing to the shopping center, Andrea purchased new shoes and jeans, eager to wear them to a party at the club that was approaching soon. That evening, Andrea, still a high school student, planned to attend a gathering at the local youth center, where her friends and acquaintances were waiting for her. The center was only a 15-minute walk from Andrea's home in the small town of Bad Belzig. Because the town was considered extremely safe, with no earlier incidents of attacks or crimes, Andrea's parents felt at ease allowing her to walk to the party alone. Andrea was supposed to be back home by 10 p.m. to watch a horror movie with her mother, as this was their usual evening routine. However, when Andrea did not return on time, her family assumed she would be home after a few hours. Andrea's friends who attended the party said she never arrived, which made them concerned. This was strange for Andrea, who was known for being reliable and punctual. She had never been late before, so her friends became increasingly uneasy. Unfortunately, contacting Andrea directly was difficult, as mobile phones were not widespread at the time, and the youth center didn't have a landline phone. Her friends would have had to leave the party and call her from another place. Still, the group decided not to make assumptions and stayed at the club. They believed Andrea might be dealing with family matters that kept her from attending the gathering. Even though the youth center was nearby, none of them attempted to check on her. The girls thought Andrea was either running late or possibly grounded at home, so they continued enjoying the party. However, when Andrea still had not returned home by midnight, her mother became increasingly worried. Typically, Andrea would have been home by that time, watching another horror movie. At first, Andrea's mother believed she was late because she had gone out with friends or visited someone's house. But as the hours continued to pass and Andrea did not come home, her mother grew more and more alarmed. She attempted to contact her daughter's friends, the ones Andrea was supposed to be meeting that evening, but none of them were at home. This left her without any way to learn where Andrea might be. Later, one of the girls finally answered the phone, but she had no information about Andrea. The mother grew increasingly anxious, realizing that her daughter could not stay out so late since she had school the following day. By 1 a.m., the mother's worry reached a critical point. She woke her husband, and at 1:30 a.m., they headed out in their car to search for Andrea. They spent hours looking around the area surrounding Bad Belzig, but found nothing. They stopped by the youth center, but Andrea wasn't there. Andrea's friends could not offer a clear explanation for her disappearance. It was also uncertain whether she went missing on her way to the club or after she had left it. Most party attendees had already gone home, and the remaining youths could not provide much information. Around 4 a.m., Andrea's distressed parents reported her missing to the local police. However, the police reacted slowly and did not conduct a prompt search for Andrea. The officers initially assumed that Andrea had simply gone out and would return home by herself in the morning once she had sobered up. However, her parents were convinced that something terrible had happened to her. They knew Andrea would not run away because she had no reason to do so. All of Andrea's belongings and money remained at home. She wasn't seeing anyone, and none of her friends had encountered her that night. A week passed before the police began investigating Andrea's disappearance. Until that point, her parents had been searching the town by themselves. They had contacted every local hospital, but none of them had any information about Andrea. As the search continued without progress, Andrea's parents grew increasingly suspicious of a plot of land that had once belonged to Andrea's ex-boyfriend's grandfather. Andrea and her ex-boyfriend had ended their relationship shortly before she vanished. There were claims that her ex-boyfriend was struggling to handle the breakup. The outside of the property looked deserted, except for a small, old shed that drew the attention of Andrea's parents. They suspected that Andrea's ex-boyfriend might be connected to her disappearance. They believed it was possible that he had ambushed her on her way to the club, harmed her, and taken her away. The parents quickly contacted Andrea's ex-boyfriend, but he denied any involvement. He claimed he had been at home the entire evening and night, and his family members were prepared to verify his alibi. However, Andrea's family did not believe him. Andrea's parents informed the police about the suspicious piece of land owned by her ex-boyfriend's grandfather, and the police agreed to investigate it. It was not until a full week after Andrea's disappearance that the police finally began to take the case seriously. Detectives started questioning the individuals who had been at the youth club on the night Andrea went missing. Many of the party attendees were friends and acquaintances of Andrea, but their statements did not provide any clarity on the situation. The teenagers who regularly visited the club often mixed up their dates and days, making their accounts confusing and unclear. Some individuals claimed they had seen Andrea at the party, while others denied it. At first, investigators believed Andrea might have arrived at the gathering, then become lost in the crowd, left with someone she knew, or possibly been attacked. This assumption seemed plausible, considering that parties with teenagers often involve alcohol, which can lead to incidents when people are leaving. However, after interviewing more witnesses, it became evident that Andrea never actually reached the party, a fact confirmed by her friends who had been waiting for her. Andrea, who was known for her beauty at school, did not appear to meet her friends. Detectives considered the statements from Andrea's closest friends the most reliable. Police meticulously examined all possible routes Andrea could have taken to get to the club. They organized a large-scale search operation with trained dogs and numerous volunteers. Despite their extensive efforts, they were unable to uncover any trace of Andrea. Numerous press conferences and television reports were held to urge citizens to help find Andrea and to warn them of potential danger. Andrea's parents and law enforcement collaborated closely in investigating her disappearance. They issued public appeals for negotiation in case Andrea had been abducted, set up hotlines for witness tips, and offered monetary rewards. However, all attempts failed due to a lack of evidence or leads. Many tips were investigated but proved to be false. Detectives could only reconstruct a rough timeline of events leading to Andrea's disappearance. On the evening of Thursday, October 7, 1993, Andrea arrived home from a shopping center with her parents at around 6 p.m. She went to her room, listened to music, and looked over her new clothes. The family had dinner together, and Andrea planned to attend a party at the youth club afterward. She tried calling a friend to go with her, but the friend was already at the club and could not be reached. Andrea chose to go alone, and her parents were unaware of what she did afterward. Investigators suspected that Andrea might have been the victim of a sexual assault. They believed that her attractive appearance could have drawn the interest of a predator, resulting in a crime. To investigate this possibility, detectives compiled a list of Andrea's ex-boyfriends and admirers and checked their alibis. The investigation found that every suspect had a solid alibi for the time of the incident, making their involvement unlikely. Unfortunately, The surveillance system at the time was not well developed, which made the investigation more challenging. Detectives began seeking witnesses who might have seen what happened to Andrea. They learned that she had taken a shortcut to the club that evening, and several people had seen her along the route. According to their statements, Andrea had walked past a group of young people and a pair of teenagers. But she did not know any of them, so she simply continued walking. The last individuals to see Andrea alive were two boys, 13-year-old Robin and 14-year-old David. By law, their identities and photographs were kept confidential, but detectives managed to locate them and obtain their statements. The boys said they had merely nodded at Andrea and then gone their separate ways. After that, Andrea seemed to vanish. It became evident that Andrea never reached the meeting point with her friends, which meant something terrible must have occurred to her along the way. The route she took was a little-known shortcut familiar mostly to local residents. Because of this, the search for suspects centered on people living in nearby houses. Immediately, the police focused their investigation on Robin and David, the two teenagers who were the last to see Andrea alive. Both boys came from troubled home situations and lived close to the Andrea family's residence. They were familiar with the path Andrea had used. Although they were young, Robin and David had a record of minor offenses, including thefts and break-ins. However, there was not enough evidence to accuse them of a serious crime such as assault or abduction. Because of Robin and David's young age, the suspicions against them were eventually dismissed. The case came to a halt, and for the next 7 years, no new developments emerged. Then, on July 7, 2000, a local resident made a horrifying discovery while out walking. His dog found a human skull and brought it to him, placing it on the ground. At first, the man assumed the skull was a ball, but he soon realized it was actually a human skull stripped of its flesh. The skull had a hole in the occipital bone. Initially, the resident believed the dog had discovered old remains from World War II, as burials from that period were often found in the region. To be cautious, he reported it to the police. When detectives received the information, they quickly arrived at the location with search dogs. The place where the skull was found belonged to Andrea's former boyfriend. After a long and detailed search, a full human skeleton was discovered behind the door of a partially collapsed shed, hidden under a pile of construction debris. The skeleton's deteriorated condition made early identification impossible. Searching the nearby utility building uncovered no clues, personal belongings, clothing fragments, or other evidence. In recent years, the only person to have disappeared without a trace in the area was Andrea Lohigian. As a result, most people immediately assumed the remains were hers. Andrea's parents described the clothing she had worn on the day she went missing, including the new black platform shoes and jeans she had bought that same day. However, none of these clothing items were found in the shed, suggesting that the perpetrators had likely disposed of them. It was also possible that Andrea's clothes had been torn off shortly before her death, perhaps during an attempted assault. The remains were identified as Andrea's only after a thorough forensic examination, including a comparison of dental records. This allowed Andrea's family to finally learn the truth about her fate and give her a proper burial. However, it also raised questions about how thorough the initial search efforts had been, since her body was recovered in an area that had already been examined before. A review of the search operation reports indicated that investigators had indeed searched the area, including the abandoned shed filled with debris, but they had not noticed anything unusual at the time. It is possible that the body was placed there later, but no evidence exists to confirm this. The investigation initially focused on the statements of witnesses who claimed to have seen Andrea in the company of two teenagers, Robin and David, aged 13 and 14, shortly before she vanished. Andrea's disappearance after being seen with Robin and David appeared suspicious. The boys were questioned again and repeated that they had seen Andrea on the night she disappeared, but had only greeted her and had no involvement in what happened to her. Despite the lack of evidence, the investigation still pointed toward their possible involvement in Andrea's disappearance. It seemed unlikely that boys so young could be responsible for her murder, but their involvement could not be entirely dismissed. Further investigation revealed that the boys had a connection to the place where Andrea's remains were found. Witnesses had seen Robin and David near the shed on multiple occasions, and it was learned that they had access to the inside of the abandoned structure. Additionally, eyewitnesses reported seeing the boys at the entrance of the shed on the evening Andrea disappeared, raising more questions and increasing suspicions about Robin and David's involvement in the crime. The investigation into the boys' potential role in Andrea's disappearance was eventually dropped due to a lack of evidence and their young age. At the time, detectives did not believe it was plausible for schoolboys to be responsible. The search for Andrea continued, but authorities, the media, and her family were unable to uncover any meaningful information. The case reached a dead end and was eventually shelved as unsolved. Without direct evidence pointing to the killer, detectives stopped their efforts. It was not until 2012, when new leadership took over the regional police department, that the case was reopened. Although new leads and evidence surfaced, there was still not enough proof to charge anyone. At this stage, detectives did not have a prime suspect. In May 2016, the case took a significant turn when David, now 37, died in Berlin from severe pancreatic disease caused by years of drug addiction and an unstable lifestyle. He had been one of the teenagers who last saw Andrea alive. During a train journey, David suffered a fatal internal hemorrhage, and his death certificate cited natural causes despite his extensive criminal background. After David's death, a witness came forward to authorities claiming to possess information that could solve Andrea's murder. David's mother was the witness, but she had hidden the disturbing truth about her son's involvement in the case. She revealed that on the evening of the murder in 1993, David, then 14, and his 13-year-old friend Robin encountered Andrea while walking along the same path. The two boys, attracted to Andrea's fashionable clothing, decided to attack and rob her. When Andrea recognized them in the darkness, and realizing they might be identified, Robin and David brutally killed her. Investigators were stunned by this sudden development. They had previously suspected Robin and David of wrongdoing, but lacked evidence to charge them. Their involvement had also seemed doubtful due to their young age. Until then, the boys had only been involved in minor legal troubles and had avoided punishment because of their youth. No one suspected that this lack of punishment would embolden them to commit more serious crimes. Years later, 36-year-old Robin was brought in for questioning. His former accomplice, David, had since passed away, so the police had to rely on Robin's testimony. Robin confessed to everything, including the gruesome details of the crime. He asked to speak with his family first to confess to them, before providing a final statement to the investigators. The detectives agreed to give Robin 48 hours to meet with his family, appreciating his willingness to cooperate. However, they had no idea that Robin had already planned his next move. When he returned to his apartment, his wife was temporarily away. Robin left a note for his wife and a message for the police detailing his involvement in the attack on Andrea Lohigian. Then, he disappeared without a trace. 2 days later, Robin was declared missing after he failed to show up. On November 4th, 2016, a hunter discovered his body in the mountains. Robin's mutilated body was found at the bottom of a deep ravine. It appeared that Robin had taken his own life, so unable to cope with the guilt he committed in his youth. In his final note, Robin described the horrific details of the crime. Robin never knew why David started the attack, as David never shared his reasons with him. Despite this, Robin was able to recall the rest of what happened during the incident. According to Robin, they had no prior connection to the victim, Andrea Lohigian. When Andrea was walking along a small road near a club, she met Robin and David. The attack was a sudden and spontaneous act of aggression. Andrea probably chose that route to get to the party quickly and save time. When Robin thought back to the encounter, he remembered exchanging friendly greetings with Andrea alongside his friend David. Initially, Robin intended to continue his journey home, but his plans changed unexpectedly. David suddenly and aggressively attacked Andrea, catching both her and Robin off guard. After the assault, Robin and David concealed Andrea's body in a nearby outbuilding adjacent to the youth center. They covered the body with construction materials and then left the area. According to Robin's account, there was no apparent motive for the attack, such as theft or personal gain. The act seemed to be driven by a senseless and extreme aggression. Robin and David both had encounters with drug dealers while they were in school. Additionally, they were both under the influence of drugs on the night the incident occurred. Peter Lemon, the head of the youth center that Andrea was planning to visit, had fond memories of her. He described Andrea as a well-behaved guest who did not drink alcohol and mainly came to the center to play billiards and socialize with friends. Peter was deeply shocked by the violence against Andrea and provided full cooperation to the authorities investigating the incident. Peter had also been told about Robin and David. They often seen loitering near a shed a short distance from the club. There were numerous negative rumors going around about these boys, but Peter couldn't bring himself to believe that such young people were capable of committing such severe offenses. However, it turned out that these very juveniles had been roaming freely. For 20 years, Andrea's disappearance remained unsolved. Despite a written confession from Robin and witness testimonies placing Robin and David near the scene of the crime, the investigation lacked direct evidence against the suspects with no DNA or fingerprints found. Detectives carefully analyzed every word from Robin, including their social media posts and phone contents. The investigators were looking for clues that might suggest the suspects discussed or admitted to the crime. Shortly before his death, David's online accounts revealed ominous posts that seemed to hint at his involvement in Andrea's disappearance. But these leads were considered secondary evidence. It is presumed that David knew the investigation had reopened and was consumed by guilt. Although he did not intend to surrender to authorities, his life had spiraled downward due to his struggle with drug addiction. David's mother believed her son's death was a sign from fate. She had been afraid to turn him into the police, and David and his friend Robin were hesitant to share information about their past because they feared revenge from people they had previously associated with. This fear was legitimate, considering David had a history of violent behavior and convictions for drug-related crimes. Despite accumulating indirect evidence, one aspect of the case horrified detectives. How could two ordinary 13- and 14-year-old boys commit such a heinous crime against Andrea? As a result, Andrea's relatives and the investigators began to suspect that a third person, an adult, might have been involved in the crime, guiding Robin and David. The investigation showed that Andrea's death resulted from a severe head injury caused by a blunt object. The seriousness of the injury suggests it would have required considerable physical strength to inflict. The detectives questioned whether Robin and David could overpower an older girl and cause such an injury. This led them to consider the possibility of an adult accomplice, a theory supported by additional evidence. A new suspect emerged, an older man associated with Robin and David's social circle. However, his name was not disclosed. Robin's testimonies and pre-death note did not mention a third accomplice, and David's mother rejected the idea. Despite this, some witness statements indicated an adult might have been involved. Specifically, several witnesses reported seeing a truck driver around the suspect's age near the shed at the time of Andrea's disappearance. Investigators were able to identify this individual and link him to the case. In reality, Andrea and her killers, Robin and David, attended the same school. However, due to their age difference, they did not share classes, participate in the same activities, or have mutual friends. They may have crossed paths in the hallways or cafeteria. Andrea might have had prior conflicts with Robin and David, which intensified their dislike for her. Robin and David both came from difficult and unstable households, which led them to begin using alcohol and drugs at a young age as a way to cope. On the night of the incident, they may have been under the influence of alcohol or drugs, which could have made them more aggressive. What is more striking is that Andrea's remains were found on a plot of land owned by a relative of one of the killers, her ex-boyfriend's grandfather. Some believe this connection cannot be a coincidence and suspect the involvement of her ex-boyfriend in the case. The public was shocked and outraged when it became known that these very teenagers were responsible for the murder. The revelation led to widespread criticism, primarily because detectives had initially dismissed the case in the 1990s, citing the suspect's youth. Had detectives investigated these teenagers as suspects at the time of the crime, it is likely that the victims' bodies would have been found much sooner. An earlier investigation could have enabled authorities to bring the killers to justice. The autopsy results indicated that Andrea had suffered a fractured skull, but the object used to cause the injury could not be determined. The investigation relied solely on a few small bones of Andrea, as the rest of the skeleton had decomposed. The inquiry into the juvenile offenders depended heavily on testimonies from David's mother and notes from Robin, since no direct physical evidence existed. One of the main concerns for detectives after reopening the case was whether David and Robin had committed any additional crimes during the more than 20 years they had remained free. Although it seemed unlikely, the detectives could not dismiss the possibility. They spoke with local residents. However, the detectives did uncover a history of minor offenses committed by David and Robin. Further investigation into these incidents revealed unsettling secrets. As detectives examined Robin's potential connection to a recent serious crime, they uncovered a troubling incident. In January 2014, a French student named Louise vanished after meeting with friends at the university hospital. Louise had arranged to meet her friends over the phone shortly before leaving home, but she never arrived. When Louise's friends tried calling her, her phone did not answer. Believing she had urgent matters to handle, her friends returned home, but when Louise failed to appear for work the next day without explanation, they grew worried, as this was uncharacteristic of her. Louise was a responsible person, yet one evening her phone became unreachable and her location remained unknown. Later, Louise's body was found, and the primary suspect in her murder was identified as Robin, a juvenile previously linked to Andrea's murder and who had later taken his own life. What made the situation even more disturbing was that Louise personally knew Robin, yet she had no knowledge of his dark past. As a result, she became his second victim. Despite the suspicions, establishing Robin's responsibility for Louise's murder proved difficult due to the absence of direct evidence. The case remains unresolved, and many have criticized the police for discontinuing their investigation into Robin and David, suspects in Andrea's 1993 murder, because of their young age at the time. The carelessness displayed in handling the case enabled criminals to commit new crimes with a high likelihood. Robin's earlier offenses were disregarded, and his case remained unsolved, ultimately resulting in Louise's death. Years earlier, Andrea's body had been left to decompose, and her case was also neglected. Andrea's family believes that the young perpetrators never received the punishment they deserved for their crimes. Even though the killers are dead, they still had the opportunity to live freely for a period and enjoy the simple pleasures of life. The motives behind Andrea's murder, like many other aspects of the case, remain unclear due to a lack of evidence. This case demonstrates that the belief that young people are incapable of committing serious crimes is incorrect. Although the truth will eventually emerge, it may come too late to achieve justice. Andrea's youth, filled with potential and hopes for the future, was tragically taken. Moving on to the next case. The case of Lisa Holm. Lisa Holm was born on February 7, 1998, in the small Swedish town of Hue, where she grew up in a peaceful environment with her parents and older sister. Lisa was a kind, positive, and determined individual with a strong personality. She had already decided to study architecture in Australia before completing her education. Lisa's love for travel was sparked by numerous trips with her parents to various countries, which also instilled in her a sense of independence from her teenage years. To earn her own money, she took on part-time jobs. In the summer of 2015, at the age of 17, Lisa landed her first job at a cafe located about 40 minutes from her home. Initially, her parents drove her to work, but soon her father gifted her a scooter. The scooter was a welcome gift, allowing her to commute to work independently. However, for the first few weeks, her father accompanied her to ensure her safety, as she had limited experience driving on the roads. Lisa only worked on weekends, and her father always took her to and from the cafe. However, on June 7th, her father decided to let her drive herself. On that particular day, her parents visited her at work during lunch when the cafe was very busy. They had a quick snack together before returning home. Later that day, at 6:23 p.m., Lisa sent her father a text saying she was leaving work. 3 minutes later, he received a call from her, but there was no answer when he picked up. He heard a soft voice over the phone and the sound of a car door closing, leading him to believe that Lisa had accidentally dialed his number while talking to a coworker. Despite calling out her name several times, he got no response and eventually ended the call, expecting her to arrive home soon. However, as the minutes passed, Lisa failed to show up, causing her parents to grow increasingly worried. It was her first time driving the scooter alone, and her father was deeply concerned for her safety. He attempted to call her multiple times, but her phone was turned off. After waiting a few more minutes, Lisa's father decided to drive along the route she would have taken, hoping to meet her along the way. He drove slowly, scanning the road for any sign of her, fearing she might have been in an accident. Despite his efforts, there was no sign of Lisa. He arrived at the cafe where his daughter worked, but she was not there. However, her scooter was parked outside, which initially calmed his nerves. Upon closer inspection, he noticed her scooter keys were still in the ignition and her helmet was hanging from the handle. This discovery raised his concerns, as Lisa would never leave her scooter unattended. Around the same time, Lisa's mother contacted the cafe owner, hoping to get information about her daughter's whereabouts. The cafe owner claimed to be unaware of Lisa's location and explained that she had spoken to her employees earlier, who said they were closing the cafe. The cafe owner then drove to the cafe and met up with Lisa's father. Together, they began searching the cafe and its surroundings. The cafe owner also enlisted the help of 4 friends who lived nearby. As the search continued, Lisa's mother and older sister checked the bus schedule, thinking it was possible that Lisa might have taken the bus instead of her scooter. They drove to the bus stop in their town, but unfortunately, Lisa was not on the bus. Despite their efforts, Lisa's family was still unable to locate her, and their concerns continued to grow. Lisa's relatives quickly contacted the police after realizing she was missing. It was nearly 1 p.m. Police immediately conducted an extensive search. A crucial discovery was Lisa's scooter, which had been left in the parking lot with the keys still in it, leading the police to suspect that she might have been abducted. Abductions are extremely rare in Sweden, particularly in Lisa's rural hometown, so the police responded swiftly by deploying multiple search teams with dogs and having officers canvass every nearby house. As news of Lisa's disappearance spread, her classmates and friends took to social media to raise awareness and potentially gather witness accounts. Despite the overnight search, no progress was made. On Monday morning, the police publicly announced Lisa's disappearance and urged anyone with information to come forward. Around the same time, a man working at a barn across from the cafe found a motorcycle glove on the floor and reported it to the police. Detectives re-examined a barn previously inspected on the evening of Lisa's disappearance and discovered a glove. They presented the glove to Lisa's parents, who identified it as their daughter's, providing further evidence for the abduction theory. Police intensified the search by sending additional personnel and equipment to assist. By then, Lisa's disappearance had made national headlines, drawing hundreds of volunteers to the search. On Tuesday, the police received multiple leads. A group of volunteers searched a dirt road near the cafe, finding a phone case, receipt, ticket, and broken smartphone screen. After discovering these items, investigators confirmed that they all belonged to Lisa, so they concentrated the search in that area. Further investigation yielded additional parts of the broken smartphone, Lisa's ID, and more receipts. These items were all scattered along the same dirt road, increasing the police's certainty that Lisa was indeed a victim of abduction. The search for Lisa quickly gained widespread attention and support, with the number of people involved growing significantly each day. The case became the main news story in Sweden. Hundreds of volunteers from across the country flocked to participate in the search. A group of local volunteers specializing in finding missing people also joined the search for Lisa. This made Lisa's search operation the largest in Sweden's modern history, with over 1,000 people involved. The police received numerous calls with potential leads. A woman reported a suspicious incident while she was jogging. The day before Lisa went missing, a man standing next to his car stopped her on the road and asked for directions to an unfamiliar city in English. When she tried to help him using Google Maps, the man asked her to get into his car to show the route on his navigator. The woman found this request suspicious and refused, continuing her jog instead. She shared this crucial detail with the police. She believed she had seen the man before among the workers repairing a barn across the road from the cafe where Lisa was last seen. On the day Lisa went missing, her co-workers noticed something unusual. A witness saw 2 men standing across the road from the cafe, staring at the shop. Although the witness did not think much of it at the time, she shared this detail with the police after Lisa's disappearance. The following morning, Lisa's father and some friends searched the dirt road where her belongings had been found. As they went further, they discovered Lisa's driver's license and house keys. It appeared that Lisa's abductor had been throwing her belongings out of a vehicle. Despite all efforts, police and volunteers found no other clues in the area. That evening, a friend of Lisa's father was driving home from the search when he noticed that the police tape had been removed from the barn where Lisa's glove had been found. He decided to re-examine the barn for clues. The friend retrieved a flashlight from his car as it was getting dark and searched the barn for several minutes. He soon spotted something shiny on the floor, which turned out to be a woman's earring, along with an identical earring nearby. The man reported his discovery to the police, who then showed the earrings to Lisa's parents. After confirming that the earrings belonged to their daughter, the police conducted a more thorough search of the storehouse. Initially, the detective explained that the primary focus on the first day of the search had been finding Lisa herself. As a result, the barn had not been thoroughly inspected, and small items like earrings may have been overlooked. This time, however, numerous forensic experts and search dogs were brought in to aid the investigation. During the more extensive search, the police found a piece of evidence behind one of the walls that initially seemed unrelated to the case: human feces. Forensic experts, however, proposed an intriguing theory. According to them, in the aftermath of committing severe crimes, the perpetrator's body often releases a significant amount of adrenaline, sometimes leading to a sudden and uncontrollable urge to defecate. It is not uncommon for perpetrators to lose control of their bodily functions due to adrenaline during a crime. Given that Lisa's glove and earrings were discovered in the storehouse, investigators suspected that if she had been abducted, the perpetrator might have taken her to the storehouse. They considered the possibility that the perpetrator, under the influence of adrenaline, might have relieved themselves and left behind feces. These feces were subsequently sent for DNA analysis. On Friday, the search area was expanded, and volunteers searched a farm approximately 2 miles from the cafe. The farm consisted of several large buildings with many employees, and the search team decided to inspect each one. Shortly after their arrival, 2 men appeared, communicating only in English as they did not speak Swedish. One of them claimed that the police had already searched the farm, but the search team leader was skeptical. He believed he would have been informed if the police had indeed visited the farm, so he decided to proceed with the search. The 2 men observed the volunteers for a while before leaving. About an hour later, the search team discovered a pile of branches behind the cow shed. Upon closer inspection, they found a motorcycle helmet, jacket, and headphones hidden underneath. The police swiftly arrived at the scene and confirmed that the items found were indeed Lisa's. To gather more evidence, forensic experts were dispatched to the farm for a thorough investigation. Detectives also investigated the story about the 2 suspicious men who had attempted to deter volunteers from searching the farm. During their inquiry, police revisited a report from a woman who had encountered an English-speaking man while jogging. The police had a potential suspect in mind. In the early stages of the search, they had visited nearby houses, including a house where 2 Lithuanian brothers lived with their wives. What caught the police's attention was that these 3 individuals did not speak Swedish and communicated in English, making them the only people in the area who did not speak the local language. Additionally, the police had other indirect reasons to suspect them. The brothers worked at a barn near the cafe and the farm where Lisa's helmet was found, indicating they were familiar with these locations. Furthermore, the dirt road where Lisa's belongings were discovered led directly to their house. The police decided to question the 3 individuals, as they were the prime suspects. Meanwhile, forensic experts and volunteers arrived at the farm to continue their inspection. Their attention was drawn to an old, neglected trailer surrounded by tall grass, which appeared to have been abandoned for years. However, the flattened grass near the door suggested recent activity. Trapped grass under the door also indicated it had been opened recently. Upon opening the door, the forensic experts were met with a strong smell of decay. Inside, they found a changing room with multiple clothing lockers, all locked except one. This led them to suspect that Lisa's body might be inside one of the locked lockers. However, they eventually found Lisa's body in an unlocked closet, hidden behind a pile of old clothes and rags. Despite the small space, the perpetrator had managed to fit Lisa inside. A rope was around her neck, and her head was covered with a large amount of tape. Her pants were pulled down, and her shirt was pulled up. Medical experts concluded that Lisa's cause of death was strangulation, with no evidence of sexual assault. Her clothing was sent to the lab for further examination. As news of her body's discovery spread rapidly across the country, the case had already been making headlines in Sweden. The brutality of Lisa's murder shocked the entire nation, as such crimes are extremely rare in Sweden. A strange and disturbing discovery was made on YouTube the same day her body was found. A video titled 13, featuring a countdown timer, had been posted 13 days before the murder. What made this video even more alarming was that it had been uploaded to a channel called Lisa Home. News of the video spread quickly through the media, leaving many people stunned by the series of coincidences. Some speculated that the murder had been predicted, but it was later revealed that the channel name and video title had been changed after Lisa's body was discovered, explaining the eerie coincidence. This raised concerns that it could be a joke or an attempt to create another conspiracy theory. Meanwhile, the police worked tirelessly day and night to catch Lisa's murderer and solve the case as quickly as possible at the time of the discovery. Investigators had already questioned 2 brothers and a woman, all of whom denied any involvement in the murder. The 3 individuals claimed to have been at home at the time of the abduction, providing alibis for one another. According to their accounts, the older brother, Narrages, was asleep in his room while his wife was preparing dinner, and the younger brother was using the computer. Narrages also stated that around 8 p.m., he woke up and went to a gas station to buy pizza and cigarettes. The police were skeptical of their alibis, as it was possible that the 3 were covering for each other. DNA samples were collected, but initially, no evidence directly linked any of them to the murder. However, this was short-lived. Forensic experts were working diligently in the storehouse and on the farm, utilizing all available resources, and soon their efforts paid off. In the storehouse, a small office-like room was discovered with a large window overlooking the cafe. Upon investigation, experts found 15 semen stains on the walls and floor near the window, suggesting that someone had been standing there watching the cafe employees, including Lisa, and engaging in self-gratification. The semen samples were sent to the lab for analysis, and DNA profiles were quickly extracted. All 15 samples matched the DNA of 35-year-old Narrages. Additionally, the feces found in the storehouse also belonged to him. In the adjacent room, previously used for storing cow's milk, forensic experts noticed a pipe about 2 feet above the floor with a thick layer of dust, except for a small strip. The size of this strip matched the rope used to strangle Lisa. Blood was also found on the pipe, and DNA analysis confirmed it belonged to Narrages. On the floor beneath the pipe, a piece of the same rope was discovered. Experts analyzed it and found 2 DNA profiles, Lisa's and Narrages. This discovery was an important clue for the police. It indicated that the rope used to kill Lisa was connected to Narrages. A crucial piece of evidence was discovered in the room where Lisa's body was found, a hair belonging to her. Further investigation revealed DNA traces from Narrages on Lisa's jacket, leading the police to believe she was killed in that location. Police have been studying the evidence and using it to piece together what might have happened. Narrages had been watching the cafe for some time and waited for an opportunity to strike. When Lisa was alone in the parking lot, he approached her, possibly asking for directions or using another tactic to gain her trust. He may have then asked her to get into his car to enter the route into the GPS system. Given Lisa's kind nature and willingness to help others, it is likely she agreed to assist him. Once she was in the car, Narrages taped her mouth shut and drove her to the storehouse. There, he bound her with a rope. According to medical experts, the killer's adrenaline rush at the scene may have caused him to lose control of his bodily functions, resulting in defecation on the floor. After Lisa's death, the perpetrator placed her body in the car and drove to the farm, discarding her belongings along the way. He then hid her body in the trailer locker, covering it with old clothes. The entire ordeal, from abduction to hiding the body, took the perpetrator less than an hour. Narrages maintains his innocence despite mounting evidence against him. His wife and younger brother were released due to lack of evidence and promptly returned to their home country, Lithuania. The trial preparations were intense, with Narrages claiming his DNA was found at the crime scene because he had worked in the storehouse for a long time. He also provided an alibi, which was corroborated by his wife and brother, although their credibility was questionable. This defense may have some weight in court, but the finding of his DNA on Lisa's clothing suggests direct contact on the day of the murder. Furthermore, a witness reported seeing Narrages' car near the cafe around the time of Lisa's abduction, contradicting his alibi. The car was seen driving back and forth between the cafe and the farm. While Narrages claimed to have been sleeping at home, according to his brother and wife, months after Lisa's body was discovered, experts continued to analyze the evidence using advanced equipment. They found Narrages' DNA on nearly all of Lisa's clothing, including her underwear. Given the high-profile nature of the case, investigators sought additional clues to solidify the evidence against Narrages. As part of their investigation, they traveled to Lithuania to re-question Narrages' wife and brother. Narrages' wife maintained her initial alibi, claiming he was at home between 6 o'clock and 8 p.m. However, when detectives spoke with Narage's younger brother, they finally obtained the information they needed. After being presented with the evidence against Narage's and the details of the crime, the younger brother revealed that Narage's was not at home that evening. According to the younger brother, Narage's returned around 7:30 p.m., covered in dirt, and immediately washed his clothes. When the police began questioning the residents and approached their house, Narage's instructed his brother to tell police he was home at the time of the crime. Narage's later explained that he was afraid of being wrongly accused due to his immigrant status and lack of alibi during the abduction. The younger brother initially believed Narage's innocent, but after learning about the evidence, he realized this was not true. A month after the murder, a large crowd attended Lisa's funeral, far exceeding the church's capacity of 130 people. To accommodate the mourners, organizers set up benches and large screens outside, allowing everyone to watch the ceremony. Months later, the trial began. Narage's lawyer argued that his client's DNA on Lisa's clothing could be explained by his work in the storehouse. However, the prosecution countered that this explanation did not hold up, especially regarding Lisa's underwear. The only plausible way Narage's DNA could have ended up on her underwear was through direct contact. The lawyer failed to provide any evidence supporting Narage's innocence. At one point, lawyers suggested an alternative theory that Narage's younger brother was the real killer. The defense failed to address the possibility of DNA manipulation during the trial, which lasted a month and resulted in Narage's being found guilty of murder. He was subsequently sentenced to life imprisonment in a high-security Swedish prison, which offered relatively comfortable living conditions. Narage's lawyer attempted to appeal the verdict, but was unsuccessful. In 2017, Narage's made a surprising decision when he requested to be deported to a prison in Lithuania, despite Lithuanian prisons being notoriously worse than Swedish ones. The court granted his request, probably because it would result in substantial cost savings for Swedish taxpayers. It did not take long to understand the reason behind Narage's decision. He appealed to the Lithuanian court and successfully had his sentence reduced from life to 15 years. However, this victory was short-lived, as the court later overturned the decision, reinstating his life sentence. Unfortunately for Narage's, he was now stuck in a Lithuanian prison with no chance of returning to the more comfortable Swedish prison. In August 2022, 5 years after his initial imprisonment, Narage's was transferred to another prison in Lithuania, where he encountered another life-threatening situation. During a block transfer, an inmate attacked Narage's with a shank, causing severe injuries that ultimately led to his death en route to the hospital. Regarding Narage's wife, the question of her involvement in the crime remains unclear. Although police believe it is highly unlikely that she was directly involved in the abduction or murder, they do not rule out the possibility that she may have been aware of her husband's actions and provided a false alibi to help him. If she had been directly involved, experts would have likely found her DNA on Lisa's clothing or belongings. Additionally, Narage's younger brother has raised suspicions. Cafe employees reported seeing 2 men, likely Narage's and his younger brother, standing near the barn and watching the employees. However, the younger brother's DNA was not found in the barn or on Lisa's clothing, making his involvement in the murder unlikely. It is possible that the brothers were indeed observing the employees and discussing inappropriate topics, but only Narage's ultimately committed the crime. Moving on to the next case. The case of Candace Rogers. Candace Rogers, also known as Candy, was born on July 18, 1949, in Spokane, Washington. She was an only child, and shortly after her birth, her parents divorced. Despite this, Candy maintained a close relationship with her father, who lived in the same city, allowing her to see him frequently. Candy was a bright and cheerful child who enjoyed spending time outdoors with friends, exploring nature, and playing with her dog. She had a strong desire to join the Campfire Girls, a well-known organization that provided girls with opportunities to learn new skills, go on hikes, and form lasting friendships. In 1959, at the age of 9, Candy finally had the opportunity to join the Campfire Girls, and she was overjoyed. As a member, one of her responsibilities was to sell mints door to door in her neighborhood, and the organization provided her with boxes of sweets to sell. On Friday, March 6th, Candy planned to sell mints after school. After returning home, having dinner, and playing with her dog, she packed 8 boxes of mints and set out around 4 p.m. Candy intended to go door to door in her neighborhood, offering sweets to her neighbors. To prevent overlapping efforts, she and the other girls in the area had assigned specific streets to visit. However, when Candy did not return home by 6 p.m. as expected, her mother began to worry. As night fell, her mother and grandfather set out to search for her, scouring the neighborhood streets but finding no sign of Candy. Soon, some family friends and neighbors joined the search, but despite their combined efforts, no trace of Candy was found. At this point, her mother decided to contact the police for assistance. By the time the police arrived, the streets were dark, and concerns grew that something might have happened to Candy. The police began their investigation by questioning neighbors and soon discovered that Candy had sold only 1 box of mints, suggesting that something may have occurred shortly after she left the house. A resident reported seeing a girl matching Candy's description on a nearby street around 6:30 p.m., which was unusual, as Candy's mother had already begun searching for her by that time. Candy's grandfather also had a strange experience while searching on the same street. He narrowly avoided being hit by a speeding green 1953 Ford, which struck the curb, but he was unable to see the license plate number. The police issued a detailed description of the vehicle and launched a search, but they were unable to locate it. Later, around 9 p.m., several mint boxes were discovered scattered along the road near a bridge. These boxes belonged to Candy, heightening concerns for her safety. Authorities concentrated their search in this area, thoroughly combing both riverbanks and a small wooded area on either side. Despite an all-night search, Candy was not found. By morning, news of her disappearance had spread through local newspapers and was soon covered by statewide media. In 1959, child disappearances near their homes were extremely rare, and the townspeople were deeply worried. To address this alarming situation, police intensified their search efforts. They deployed mounted officers, all-terrain vehicles, helicopters, and military personnel to conduct a thorough examination of the area. Additionally, over 1,000 volunteers joined the massive search from both local communities and nearby cities, making it one of the most extensive search operations of the time. Despite these efforts, Candy remained missing. The situation was further compounded when a search helicopter struck power lines and crashed, resulting in the deaths of 3 crew members. Nevertheless, police remained dedicated and relentless, working around the clock on the case. With so many investigations ongoing, officers scrutinized every detail, following nearly 750 initial leads. Regrettably, none of these investigative trails yielded definitive proof regarding Candy's whereabouts. 2 weeks after Candy's disappearance, 2 military personnel from a local base went on a hunting trip in the woods west of Spokane. They came across children's shoes on the ground, which immediately reminded them of Candy's case. Many military members had been involved in the initial search and were familiar with the details of her disappearance. The military personnel reported their discovery to the police, who then showed the shoes to Candy's grandfather for identification. He confirmed that the shoes belonged to his granddaughter. Police promptly launched a search operation in the woods. Within minutes, an officer spotted a foot protruding from the underbrush and discovered Candy's body, lying in the foliage and partially covered with pine branches. A medical examination determined that the cause of death was strangulation, and marks were observed on Candy's hands and feet, indicating that she had been bound, although no ropes were found near the body. Medical experts further concluded that Candy had been sexually abused. During the investigation, police found a green car seat cover near the crime scene. Additionally, a small purple stain was detected on Candy's clothing, which smelled like grape-flavored chewing gum. However, authorities were unable to establish any connection between the stain and the crime. Investigators continued searching for possible clues to identify the killer, examining tips and investigating hundreds of individuals, including neighbors, suspicious characters, and previously convicted criminals. Their attention eventually turned to a 50-year-old man named Alfred Braves. Alfred became a suspect due to unusual circumstances. He took his own life on the same day Candy's body was discovered, in his car near the location where the mint boxes had been found. He also lived close to Candy's home. When police found Alfred's body, they discovered a rope and women's hairpins in his car. After searching Alfred's house, police discovered numerous newspapers related to sexual crimes against women and girls. They also learned that several women had accused him of harassment, and his wife suspected him of being involved in Candy's murder. However, investigators were unable to find any evidence directly linking Alfred to the crime. Despite their suspicions, detectives had to remove him from the suspect list because there was insufficient evidence to prove his guilt. Consequently, they began investigating other potential suspects. Several months after the murder, police had compiled an extensive list of suspects, but despite their diligent efforts, the investigation made no significant progress. Later, investigators turned their attention to a new suspect, a serial killer named Hugh Morse. Hugh had been arrested in 1961 for a string of crimes, and two factors made him relevant to Candy's case. Firstly, he was known for constantly chewing grape-flavored gum, which was similar to the substance found on Candy's clothing. Additionally, Hugh had killed 2 women in Spokane just a few months after Candy's death. His history of violence also raised concerns. His first arrest had been for assaulting a woman, but he faced no serious consequences, only being discharged from the Army, where he had been serving at the time. Hugh later committed a series of robberies in Los Angeles, but served only 6 months in jail. After his release, he lured 2 8-year-old girls to a secluded area with the promise of ice cream and sexually assaulted them. Despite being arrested again, he managed to avoid prison time. A medical commission evaluated him and deemed him a sexual psychopath, resulting in his placement in a mental health facility. 2 years later, doctors declared him cured and released him from the facility. Hugh then moved to Spokane, where he began spying on women through their windows. In November 1959, he broke into the home of a 28-year-old woman, assaulted her, and ultimately killed her. 10 months later, he entered the residence of a 69-year-old woman and repeated the same violent actions. A month after that, he attacked another woman, stabbing her multiple times, though she survived the assault. Hugh continued to travel from city to city, committing numerous crimes, including attacking women and girls with a knife, sexually assaulting them, and killing 2 more victims. His crimes eventually drew the attention of the FBI, and he was added to the list of the country's 10 most wanted criminals. He was eventually captured and sentenced to multiple life terms in prison. While serving his sentence, Hugh attempted suicide but was saved by prison guards and continued serving his sentence. Detectives investigating Candy's case visited him in prison multiple times, but he consistently denied any involvement in her murder. A polygraph test was administered, which suggested he was telling the truth. However, lie detector results are considered only relatively accurate and not definitive. Despite the lack of evidence, investigators initially considered Hugh a primary suspect due to his violent background and the fact that he lived in Spokane at the time of Candy's murder. He continued to deny involvement, and police were unable to find evidence linking him to the crime. The investigation then shifted focus to another suspect, 49-year-old Howard Barnett, who had been arrested in February 1960 on suspicion of molesting a minor girl. Before taking his own life in his cell at the Spokane police station, Howard Barnett wrote a cryptic message on the wall in his own blood, stating, "I have a sin before the Lord." Detectives subsequently began investigating Barnett's potential involvement in Candy's murder, but once again, they were unable to find any evidence of his guilt. Despite this, Howard remained a primary suspect in the case due to his proximity to Candy's residence. Over the years, police continued to follow new leads and examine other potential suspects. At one point, a woman came forward claiming to have seen a green car following Candy on the day she disappeared. Police refocused their efforts on locating the vehicle, but this lead ultimately produced no results. It was notable that the woman waited many years before sharing this information. The case was reopened multiple times, but each time investigators reached a dead end. Throughout the investigation, police not only pursued new leads, but also had to verify the validity of confessions. 13 people gave false confessions to the crime. However, none were able to provide specific details that only the actual killer would have known. Instead, they often repeated information previously reported in the media. High-profile cases frequently exhibit unexpected behaviors, such as false confessions. In Candy's case, numerous detectives worked on the investigation over the years, but none were able to solve it. The crime stood out as one of the most prominent and mysterious in the city and state. Before the murder, parents felt safe letting their children play outside, but the case caused many to reconsider their views on safety. Years later, in the early 2000s, the case was reopened, and a new detective decided to apply modern technologies to re-examine the evidence. Fortunately, police had carefully collected and preserved evidence in 1959, including a sample of male semen found on Candy's clothing. Despite being stored for decades, experts were able to re-examine the sample, although the process was extremely challenging due to its age. After a lengthy investigation, experts successfully extracted a DNA profile from the evidence and uploaded it to the FBI database. However, a search of the database yielded no matches. Further cross-examination of the profile with numerous suspect samples also proved unsuccessful. For many years, suspicion had fallen on Hugh Morse, but forensic evidence revealed no connection between him and the crime. This lack of progress brought the investigation to a halt once again. Although the police possessed the killer's DNA, they struggled to identify the perpetrator. In 2021, a new detective reopened the case and decided to employ a novel approach, genetic genealogy. This innovative method had already solved numerous cold cases and offered hope for finally resolving the long-standing mystery surrounding Candy's murder. The detective reached out to multiple laboratories specializing in this type of analysis, but was met with disappointment each time. To use this method, experts required the original DNA sample, which proved challenging. Several labs attempted to work with the semen sample, but each concluded that it had degraded too much, making it impossible to extract the necessary information. The detective then consulted a final laboratory, which led to a long-awaited and significant breakthrough. With the aid of state-of-the-art tools, the experts successfully analyzed the sample and obtained the perpetrator's DNA profile. This profile was then uploaded to a genealogy database to begin searching for relatives of the DNA owner. After a thorough investigation involving thousands of individuals, researchers pinpointed one family as the likely source of the DNA sample. They discovered that the DNA probably belonged to one of 3 brothers, all of whom were deceased. However, the team found that one brother had a daughter, and the police reached out to her for assistance. The daughter was shocked by the possibility that her father might be the killer, but immediately agreed to help. She provided a DNA sample, confirming that she was closely related to the person whose semen had been found on Candy's clothing. With this new information, detectives obtained a court order to exhume her father's remains. A DNA profile extracted from the exhumed remains revealed a complete match with the DNA found on Candy's clothing, identifying the killer as John Hoff, 62 years after the crime. Hoff had never been a suspect, despite hundreds of others being investigated over the years. Detectives investigating Hoff's background uncovered his involvement in multiple crimes. At the time of Candy's murder, Hoff was 20 years old and lived less than a mile from her house. He was also a soldier in the army, stationed at a nearby base close to where Candy's body was found. 2 years after the murder, he attacked another woman, binding and sexually assaulting her before attempting to kill her. However, the woman survived. Following his arrest, Hoff received a 6-month prison sentence and was dishonorably discharged from the army. After his release, Hoff started a family, having 2 sons and 2 daughters, and lived an ordinary life. He changed jobs several times and at one point suffered a severe chemical burn to his face while working at a food packaging plant, leaving a lasting scar. Hoff's life ended in June 1970, 11 years after Candy's murder, when he took his own life without leaving a note. Further investigation revealed that Candy might have known Hoff, as she had been friends with his 10-year-old sister at the time. Years later, Hoff's sister told detectives that she had cried in Hoff's arms after Candy's murder, unaware that he had been the one responsible for her death. Candy's parents did not live to see the day the killer's identity was revealed. Her mother passed away in 2006, and her father had taken his own life in 1963, for years after the tragedy. The reason behind his death remains uncertain, though there is speculation that he was unable to cope with the loss of his daughter. Despite this, the case was eventually solved, marking one of the longest investigations in history, spanning more than 62 years and involving multiple detectives across different generations. At the press conference where the killer's name was announced, only one officer who had worked on the case in 1959 was present. He expressed gratitude for having lived long enough to learn the truth. Hoff's daughter initially struggled to accept that her father had committed such a horrific crime. However, she eventually came to terms with it, referring to her father as a monster who had taken an innocent life. She expressed regret that he had not been held accountable during his lifetime. A chilling coincidence is that Hoff took his own life when his daughter was 9 years old, the same age as Candy when she was killed. Moving on to the next case. Cody. At 23 years old, Cody was seeking a long-term partner. He confided in his friends about wanting to marry a woman who shared his values, specifically someone with a religious upbringing. On Halloween in 2011, he met Jordan, who would later become a significant figure in his life. Born in August 1991, Jordan was raised in Kalispell within a deeply religious family. She attended the Faith Baptist Church, where she worked with families and children, and her main aspiration was to become a stay-at-home mother. When Cody and Jordan first met on Halloween, they quickly developed a connection. Though initially shy, Jordan opened up to Cody about her dreams of starting a family and her love for nature. Cody became infatuated, but Jordan, only 20 at the time, was not ready for a serious relationship. They went on a few casual dates, but kept the relationship strictly platonic. However, Cody's feelings for Jordan only grew stronger, and he made a determined effort to win her affection. He joined her church, First Baptist, and started spending time with her friends and community. Before long, their friendship turned into something more. Cody and Jordan officially began dating in November 2011, and Cody became completely captivated by her, wanting to be with her constantly. Cody was certain he wanted to marry Jordan just weeks into their relationship, even though she wished to remain chaste until marriage. People close to them noticed Jordan didn't seem as emotionally invested in Cody as he was in her. While some believed this was due to her shy personality, others worried about the imbalance in their relationship. They rarely showed affection in public, didn't hold hands, and didn't flirt. So when Cody proposed in December 2012, many of Jordan's friends were surprised she accepted. They felt she wasn't ready for marriage after only a year of dating, but they were still happy for her. Jordan eagerly posted her engagement ring on Instagram, captioning the picture, "He proposed. Best early Christmas present ever." The wedding was scheduled for June 29, 2013, and preparations began right away. Cody was heavily involved, along with Jordan's best friend and matron of honor, Kimberly Martinez. Still, it was Jordan who appeared most enthusiastic about planning the wedding, even performing a song with custom lyrics by Elizabeth Shee, which would later seem strangely prophetic. Whenever anyone, including Kimberly, brought up the idea of actually being married to Cody, Jordan's mood would quickly decline. She repeatedly asked Kimberly, her matron of honor, whether she was making the right choice. On her wedding day, Jordan's true feelings about the marriage were apparent. She felt anxious and avoided making eye contact with Cody, frequently looking down. Although she managed to regain her composure for the wedding photos and their first dance, her unease continued. The morning after the wedding, Jordan confided in a friend through text from their honeymoon hotel room. She revealed she had not consummated the marriage and had rejected Cody's advances, not just on their wedding night, but for the next 6 nights as well. Jordan felt anxious about Cody's expectations and did not want to be intimate. She planned to claim her period had started, hoping it would work, as she feared being pushed into something that would make her panic. Jordan had an intense fear of sex because of her faith and her reservations about Cody, causing her to feel anxious about intimacy with him. This anxiety reached its peak on July 7th, 8 days after their wedding, when Cody canceled his golfing trip with friends at the last minute because Jordan had arranged a surprise for him. After going to church and spending some quiet time on the lake, they had dinner with friends at Dairy Queen. Cody then returned home with Jordan, and this was the last time anyone saw him. When Cody did not show up for work, his co-worker Cameron Fredrickson grew worried. As a dependable and punctual employee, Cody's absence was unusual. Cameron decided to go to Cody's new house, which he had bought with Jordan before the wedding. After knocking without a response, Cameron let himself inside and searched the house for any signs of where they might be. However, he found nothing. Cameron's concern turned into alarm when he found Cody's phone in the garage. It was unlike Cody to be without his phone, and this raised serious concerns. After making several calls, Cameron learned that no one had seen Cody since dinner at Dairy Queen at 8:30. He went straight to the police station to file a missing persons report, and authorities treated the case seriously from the beginning. Officer Chaz Zimmerman, one of the first to speak with Cameron, immediately noticed his distress. Zimmerman found it strange that Cameron's boss, rather than his wife Kimberly, had reported him missing. Later that day, Kimberly finally contacted Jordan, who claimed that Cody had left with friends in a black car with Washington plates. According to Jordan, Cody had received a troubling phone call at the restaurant, so she decided to give him space. However, that night, Kimberly retrieved her phone charger from their car and found a text from Cody. The message said that Cody planned to go for a ride with friends from out of town who were visiting. Cody did not specify who these friends were, but he always took visiting friends to Glacier Park. Jordan told police she didn't recognize the men involved in Cody's disappearance and that they had not argued that night. She suggested that Cody might have gone joyriding with out-of-town friends as a possible explanation for why he was missing. When asked why she hadn't reported Cody missing, Jordan explained she didn't want to upset him by filing a report if he intended to return within a few hours. However, as hours became days, Cody's friends and family gathered at the family home, confused about his sudden disappearance. It didn't seem like something Cody would do, leaving his wife without any explanation. Jordan continued telling the same story until Kimberly confronted her about it. As the conversation went on, Jordan grew increasingly uncomfortable. Eventually, she became so agitated that she threw her wedding ring across the room. While some believed this was just her unusual way of coping, Kimberly became convinced that Jordan was hiding something. The next day, she went home and called her friend. Meanwhile, Jordan was called to the police station, where officers confronted her about the inconsistencies in her story. One of the officers said, "Jordan, I've gathered information that contradicts what you're telling me. I've spoken with several people, and it's essential that I know you're being truthful." Jordan replied, "I understand, and I think there's more to the story." Around the same time, Sher Johnson met with the police, bringing Cody's phone records from the day he disappeared. She was worried about her son and hoped that the mysterious man Cody had called might provide clues about his disappearance. However, it turned out that the mysterious caller was simply a friend returning a tool to Cody. Police quickly ruled him out as a suspect because he had a solid alibi. His wife was in labor at the time Cody went missing. With every other lead exhausted, the police shifted their focus back to Jordan. It was evident she was hiding something, but her story still didn't make sense. On July 10th, a major breakthrough surfaced in the case. An unexpected email arrived from someone named Carmen Tony 607, claiming Cody was dead and that there was no reason to keep searching. The message said, "Hello Jordan, my name is Tony. There is no bother looking for Cody anymore. He is gone." Jordan showed the email to Hannah, remaining expressionless as she shared the news. According to the email, Cody had supposedly fallen off a cliff in Glacier National Park while with unidentified companions. Hannah was devastated after reading it and urged Jordan to report it to the police immediately. Hannah later recalled her reaction. "I was freaking out, asking what was going on. I read the email, and it said Cody was gone." Jordan showed no emotion, didn't even cry. "She simply handed me the email, and I started shaking. I told her to go to the police, and she did, but I kept rushing her, saying, 'Go move.' What are you doing?" Detective Corey Clark was frustrated that the investigation was still ongoing and that an anonymous email hadn't provided the closure they needed. In fact, the email appeared suspiciously convenient, offering precisely the information they had been looking for and instructing them to stop the search. What bothered Clark even more than the content was Jordan's reaction, or lack of one. She appeared entirely unfazed by news implying her husband had died. Jordan's behavior became even stranger when she arranged a trip to Glacier National Park with her friends and family to look for Cody. According to Hannah, Jordan was oddly cheerful during the whole drive to the park, waving her hand out the window as they traveled. Although nothing was found on the first day, they resumed searching on the second day. It was then that Jordan abruptly claimed she had found Cody's body. Her announcement was met with skepticism. "I think he's down there," she said, leaving Clark puzzled as to why Cody would be in that spot. "It's baffling that someone would do such a thing. This wall exists for a reason, after all." The autopsy later revealed that the victim's head and arms sustained the most severe injuries from the fall. Cody's loved ones were devastated by his death, but according to Hannah, Jordan felt a sense of relief. Now that a body had been located, the authorities would finally close the case. However, there was still a major problem. The police had no idea who the man behind Tony 607 was. When Jordan was first questioned about the mysterious message, she directed investigators to Tony Stockup, a fellow car enthusiast and acquaintance of Cody's. Although Tony hadn't seen Cody in several months, he was so worried about him that he gave the police full access to all his accounts. The police were unable to locate the email address they were searching for, and Jordan's and Cody's phone records offered very little information. As a result, they had to contact Google to obtain the IP address connected to Carmen Tony 607. While waiting for these details, the police re-interviewed Cody's friends and family. During these conversations, Kimberly finally told the police about Jordan's fragile emotional state before marrying Cody. She had voiced doubts and fears about marrying him, asking Kimberly repeatedly whether she should go through with the wedding. Jordan confided in Kimberly about her dread and fear of having sex with Cody, even regretting that she had married him and wishing she could undo everything. When Kimberly suggested Jordan be honest with Cody about her feelings, Jordan replied, "I should be happy, but I'm not. If I tell him, it's going to break his heart." 2 days before Cody vanished, Jordan wrote a disturbing message. "He held me down the other night, and he was in my face." On July 7th, the police uncovered another revealing exchange in which Jordan planned to speak to Cody but was terrified of how he might react. Jordan went to her friend Kim's house later that day and recounted her conversation with Cody, which had gone poorly. Cody became furious, and she left to give him space, eventually staying the night at her step-parents' home. When the police learned this, they became even more suspicious of Jordan. Around the same time, they received information from Google linking the email address Carmen Tony 607 to her stepfather's computer. Although brief interviews with each member of the Graham family suggested Jordan was responsible for the email, it wasn't definitive proof. However, cell phone records and security footage gave investigators a clearer understanding. The records showed both Cody's and Jordan's phones were near Glacier National Park on the night Cody disappeared. Security cameras even recorded them entering the park at 9:17 p.m. Despite Jordan initially denying she had been with Cody that night, the evidence suggested otherwise. On July 18, 2013, the police brought Jordan in again and presented her with the evidence. She began crying and finally revealed her account of what happened on July 8. According to Jordan, she admitted her doubts about the marriage to Cody, which led to a huge argument. Jordan and her friend decided to go to Glacier National Park and walk to the Loop Trail. Jordan described what happened next in her own words. If her friend hadn't intervened, Cody would have fallen forward down the hill. The detectives then asked her why she turned around and pushed him. Jordan believed it was because her emotions were overwhelming at the time. She felt immense pressure, anger, and every other emotion all at once. The detectives were intrigued by her mention of a blindfold, suspecting it might be connected to a stray scarf found near the scene. However, Jordan offered no further explanation, and the scarf was eventually proven unrelated. Jordan insisted that Cody's death was an accident and that she had not planned any kind of assault. She explained that she hadn't intended to kill her husband. Instead, the situation escalated, and in the heat of the moment, she pushed him off the bridge. When questioned about the incident, Jordan admitted that Cody had turned his back to her, facing the cliff, and she pushed him with both hands. She also confessed to creating a fake identity, Carmen Tony, and sending messages from her stepfather's house. Despite her confession, the police did not charge Jordan that day, and she walked out of the station as a free woman. However, they later arrested her at Cody's funeral on July 22nd, after she was seen texting on her phone, showing a level of disrespect that eroded any remaining sympathy for her. Rumors spread that Jordan had killed Cody to escape their marriage without the humiliation of divorce. Her behavior at the funeral, including texting, seemed to reinforce these suspicions, suggesting she cared more about herself than grieving Cody's death. Jordan's motives came under scrutiny as people questioned whether she ever truly loved Cody. She was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and making false statements. After examining the evidence, the jury added premeditated first-degree murder to the charges. Her trial began on December 9, 2013. From the beginning, the prosecution aggressively challenged Jordan's account, highlighting inconsistencies and raising doubts. They questioned why she lied to Cody's family and friends, and whether she felt any genuine remorse or was pretending. The prosecution's questioning was relentless, and Jordan's situation became increasingly grim. Testimonies from Cody's loved ones further harmed her case, portraying her as a callous wife who killed her husband to avoid intimacy. Her defense team tried to argue self-defense, but their chances of success appeared slim. Facing the risk of a far harsher outcome, Jordan chose to accept a plea deal, agreeing to a 30-year prison sentence without parole in exchange for the first-degree murder charge being dropped. Before sentencing, She attempted to withdraw her guilty plea after learning the prosecution planned to pursue premeditated first-degree murder, which carried a maximum sentence of 50 years. The decision fell to District Judge Donald Malloy, who had to choose whether to accept her original plea or begin a new trial. On December 13, 2013, Judge Malloy sentenced Jordan Lynn Graham to 30 years and 5 months in federal prison. Despite her attempt to take back her plea, her case was neither reopened nor reconsidered. The federal prosecutors sought to set a precedent with her case, sending a message that anyone who commits murder under federal jurisdiction will face swift and harsh punishment. As a result, Jordan will not be released from prison until she is over 52 years old. Moving on to the next case. The case of Denise Huskins. In the late hours of Sunday, March 22, 2015, 29-year-old Denise Huskins was alone in her Vallejo apartment in the San Francisco Bay Area of California. She had planned to spend the evening by herself, but her phone buzzed with a message from her ex-boyfriend, Aaron Quinn, asking to meet up for a discussion. Denise felt apprehensive, especially since their relationship had ended and she was hesitant to engage with him due to his past behavior. Denise initially declined, telling Aaron it was too late and suggesting they talk another time. However, after receiving another message from him, she sat on the sofa, contemplating her next move, reflecting on how she had met Aaron the previous summer. Originally from Boston, Massachusetts, Denise held a doctorate in physical therapy and had moved to Vallejo to join Kaiser Hospital, which specialized in treating individuals with head and spinal injuries. It was there that she met Aaron, a tall, athletic man with dark hair and striking eyes. Denise and Aaron quickly became acquainted and began chatting with each other. At first, they shared stories about their pasts. Aaron had been engaged before, but the relationship ended when he discovered his fiancée had cheated on him. Denise listened sympathetically, yet found herself developing feelings for him as well. As they spent more time together, their friendship evolved into love. By autumn 2014, they were officially a couple. However, matters took a turn in March 2015 when Denise discovered that Aaron had been secretly contacting his ex-fiancée, asking her to take him back. This revelation deeply upset Denise, prompting her to sever ties with him entirely. Although they shared many common interests and had even considered marriage, the betrayal hurt her profoundly. The sense of betrayal and hurt overshadowed her love for Aaron, leaving her heart aching. She tried to ignore the constant stream of texts from him, each one asking to meet and discuss their situation. His persistence left Denise torn and uncertain. Despite her emotional pain, she ultimately gave in to his repeated persuasion and agreed to meet him. Denise rose from her sofa and prepared to leave her residence. Around 5:30 p.m., she got into her car, stopping on the way to purchase a pizza. Upon arriving at Aaron's two-story house on the 500 block of Kirkland Avenue, she took the pizza from the passenger seat and grabbed her purse before approaching the entrance. The following day, a workday for both at the hospital, Denise called in sick around 7 a.m., citing illness. She also texted her supervisor, explaining she would be absent that week due to family matters. This was unusual for Denise, who had never missed a day of work before. Her supervisor reminded her of an upcoming scholarship deadline, but she did not respond. He assumed something serious had occurred in her family. The following Monday, when Denise and Aaron did not show up to work, the Vallejo Police Department received a call from 30-year-old Aaron. His account was confusing and difficult to believe. When officers arrived at the scene, they detected a strong chemical odor among numerous empty beer containers, and Aaron appeared disheveled. When questioned about illegal substance use, Aaron admitted to using them, but claimed he had been forced by kidnappers. The officers were doubtful, so they continued their search, moving upstairs to the master bedroom. Upon entering, the chemical odor became stronger. The room seemed to have been recently cleaned, with immaculate floors, except for a substance on the mattress. Just as they were about to leave, they spotted a small red bloodstain on the bed. The officers went back downstairs to re-examine Aaron's account. He began to recount his story. The incident started at his residence around 3 a.m., where he and his girlfriend Denise were staying. A group of men wearing black aquatic gear stormed in, bursting into the house and shining a bright light directly into their eyes. Aaron could not determine the exact number of intruders, but they quickly restrained him and Denise with nylon cable ties. The assailants also forced them to wear swim goggles with an opaque coating, preventing them from seeing beyond the goggles. The attackers carried laser targeting guns, electroshock devices, and powerful flashlights. As they moved through the house, intense light and laser beams intertwined, making it impossible for him and Denise to see anything. Aaron and Denise were instructed to wear headphones that played strange, calming music. A voice then spoke to them through the headphones, saying they were not in danger and that this was merely a robbery. The voice assured them that if they remained calm, no harm would come to them. Believing the voice, Aaron and Denise stayed silent and still. Later, Aaron's headphones were removed, and he was ordered to move to another room. In this room, the thieves demanded that Aaron provide his bank account information and other financial details. Aaron quickly gave the information, realizing that his money was likely gone for good. Aaron and Denise were returned to the living room by the burglars. One of them checked their blood pressure and then forced them to drink a mixture from a mug containing a sedative combined with another substance. Before the sedative took effect, he heard the burglars' final orders. Cameras had been installed to monitor the house. He was warned not to contact the police and threatened that if he did, Denise would be taken as a hostage. The burglars promised to send further instructions later. Shortly afterward, the sedative took effect, and Aaron lost consciousness, unaware of what was happening around him. When Aaron woke up, he discovered Denise was missing. He struggled to free himself, managed to untie his hands, and then grabbed the phone to call for emergency assistance. The police found the story he recounted suspicious, so they devised another theory that Aaron might have been involved in Denise's disappearance, or worse, her death. They suspected he may have hidden her body and then thoroughly cleaned the house to eliminate any evidence. The strong odor of bleach and other cleaning chemicals appeared to support their suspicion. He had also turned to alcohol, as evidenced by the empty bottles and his incoherent speech. To appear innocent, he might have delayed reporting the incident and fabricated a story about mysterious abductors in water gear to cover his involvement. However, the police were unconvinced by his account and regarded it as a possible diversion. They instructed him to prepare to go to the station for questioning. Following a 17-hour interrogation, the police were unable to uncover any concrete evidence to substantiate Aaron's claims that Denise was still missing, despite his persistent insistence that she was. The Vallejo police immediately launched a thorough search, employing K-9 units, divers, and numerous volunteers. After speaking with Denise's roommate, they learned that Denise and Aaron had recently broken up, which could provide a potential motive. However, before suspecting Aaron, they had to consider the possibility of an actual kidnapping. The police meticulously examined every detail of Aaron's account, looking for any information regarding the alleged kidnappers, such as their appearance and what they said. As the investigation progressed, they observed that Aaron's story became increasingly implausible. According to Aaron, he had provided his banking information to the individuals who kidnapped him, but the investigation revealed that his money remained untouched. Furthermore, just 2 hours before Aaron reported the incident, he had attempted to withdraw a large sum from his account, claiming he intended to purchase a boat. However, when questioned by detectives, Aaron stated that his kidnappers had actually demanded a ransom of $8,500. Unable to convince the bank of this, he fabricated the boat purchase story. The idea that the kidnappers would capture him and Denise solely for this amount of money cast further doubt on his narrative. During his interview, a detective noted that Aaron's pupils were unusually dilated, which could indicate drug use or a mental health condition, such as schizophrenia. It was also possible that his bizarre account of being abducted by alien-like individuals was a hallucination. Due to the complexity of the case, the Vallejo police requested assistance from the FBI. Upon arrival, the agents administered a polygraph test to Aaron, which he failed. Consequently, he became suspicious in the investigators' eyes and promptly hired a lawyer to safeguard his rights. With the support of his legal team, Aaron allowed the police to search his home, electronic devices, clothing, and even provided blood and fingerprint samples. The following day, the police organized an extensive search in Vallejo, involving over 100 teams. A police sonar detected an object in the bay resembling a human body, but divers were unable to locate it. Meanwhile, Aaron had retained a lawyer and was no longer in police custody. The search for Denise intensified, with her photograph widely circulated across various media platforms and displayed throughout the city. However, the detectives and FBI agents faced significant obstacles. On the afternoon of March 24th, a journalist at the San Francisco Chronicle received an unusual and unexpected email. The sender claimed to be the individuals who had broken into Aaron's home dressed in diving gear. The email asserted that Denise was safe and included an audio recording of her summarizing recent news articles as proof. This evidence initially alleviated concerns about her safety, indicating that she was alert, at least until that morning. Nevertheless, two aspects of this evidence raised suspicions. First, Denise's message appeared unnaturally calm, resembling a news anchor reporting a story. Secondly, the email was sent from an account belonging to Aaron, which caused authorities to suspect that he and Denise might have been involved in orchestrating the kidnapping. The police grew even more suspicious when Aaron provided his phone records, showing calls from the alleged kidnappers. However, these calls originated from an untraceable phone, meaning the caller's identity remained unknown. Investigators traced the purchase location of this disposable phone to a store near Aaron's home. Surveillance footage from the store clearly showed an individual matching Aaron's physical description: tall, athletic build, and dark hair. This finding further implicated Aaron in the suspected kidnapping plot involving Denise. 2 days after disappearing, Denise reappeared at her mother's home in Huntington Beach, California, approximately 400 miles from Vallejo, where she was supposedly abducted. As she recounted her ordeal, her story became even more extraordinary than Aaron's account. Denise claimed she was kidnapped by 4 men who kept her confined in a small space. They told her their actions were carried out under instructions from a client. Despite this, Denise stated that her captors treated her relatively well, providing basic necessities such as food and water and allowing her to maintain personal hygiene. Denise initially cooperated with the police, but she became defensive and sought a lawyer when she sensed the officers doubted her account. This left investigators confused and skeptical of her story. They suspected that Aaron and Denise might have fabricated the abduction to gain attention, become famous, or temporarily escape their problems. The detectives struggled to understand why 2 successful individuals from wealthy families would invent such a complex and false story. The Vallejo police held a news conference to reassure the public that there was no need to be concerned about recent assaults in the area. Although no suspect was identified and the existence of an abductor was not confirmed, they maintained that residents had nothing to fear. The media remained highly engaged with the case, drawing comparisons to the film Gone Girl, in which the main character stages her own disappearance. Authorities expressed disappointment that Aaron and Denise had fabricated the story, wasting valuable time and resources. They requested that Aaron and Denise issue a formal apology to the residents of Vallejo. However, both stuck to their story, insisting they were being truthful. In the early hours of June 5, 2015, a crucial clue emerged in the Denise case. A police officer in Alameda County, Northern California, responded to a reported burglary at a residence. The homeowner and his wife stated that an intruder had broken in under the cover of darkness, attempting to restrain them. The homeowner fought off the attacker while his wife locked herself in the bathroom and called for help. The intruder fled the scene but, in his haste, left his smartphone in the hallway. The police determined that the phone was registered to an individual through a telecommunications provider. They traced the registered address but found the property vacant, with the mailbox full of uncollected mail. 3 days later, the police used the discarded smartphone to trace a lead 200 miles northeast of Vallejo, arriving at an isolated cabin near South Lake Tahoe, California. The officers cautiously entered the cabin, where they found a tall, athletic man with dark hair amid cluttered piles of leftover food, trash, and clothing. At first, they overlooked the vehicle parked outside. Upon closer inspection, they discovered that the car had been reported stolen and contained several unusual items, including flashlights, a plastic gun with laser sights, a modified headset, and a black diving suit. A laptop belonging to Aaron was also found in the trunk. This evidence led to the capture of one of the individuals responsible for Denise's abduction. The man, who bore a striking resemblance to Aaron but was not him, had no prior connection to Denise or Aaron. The abductor was identified as Matthew Muller, a 38-year-old disbarred attorney who had graduated from Harvard University and was a former Marine with a previously respected reputation in the legal community. Matthew had begun engaging in strange and unlawful behavior. Authorities linked him to a home invasion in Dublin and discovered his involvement in Denise's abduction from Aaron's home. The unusual story Aaron and Denise had told law enforcement was largely accurate. Their only error was believing multiple people in diving gear had carried out the attack. In reality, Matthew masterminded the crime and acted alone. It is likely that Aaron and Denise were half asleep and confused, which led them to believe more than one person was involved. The intense light further caused them to perceive multiple attackers. This illusion was amplified by a pre-recorded message played through headphones, in which the attacker claimed to be part of a professional debt recovery team. Matthew had also been connected to a 2009 home invasion in Palo Alto, but avoided consequences due to insufficient evidence. A highly intelligent and trained lawyer, Matthew had carefully constructed an elaborate and outlandish scheme that initially led authorities to suspect that Denise and Aaron were staging a hoax. His actions reflected careful planning and intelligence, despite his mental health issues, including bipolar disorder and psychosis, as well as his belief that he had Gulf War syndrome, which made it difficult for him to distinguish reality. One day, Matthew randomly encountered Aaron and Denise and became fixated on them. He used a drone to secretly monitor their movements for 3 weeks before abducting them. Aaron had noticed a bright light in the sky the night before the incident, which he suspected might be a drone, but he could not imagine someone was actually spying on him. Matthew put his plan into action, breaking into Aaron's home at night while wearing a diving suit. He restrained both Aaron and Denise, covering their eyes with goggles and playing a pre-recorded message through headphones to convince them multiple people were involved. Matthew then separated them, keeping them in different rooms. He assaulted Denise, taking advantage of her vulnerability, and locked her in the trunk of his car. He then drove her to a remote cabin in South Lake Tahoe, where he held her for 2 days before releasing her near her parents' house. Matthew also stole Aaron's laptop, which he later used to send an email to a journalist at the San Francisco Chronicle using specialized software. Upon waking the next day, Aaron faced the devastating reality that Denise's kidnapping was real. Desperate, he contacted his bank to request a large sum of $88,500 to pay the ransom. Panicked and seeking to protect Denise, he gave a false explanation to the bank, claiming he needed the money to buy a boat. Later, Aaron contacted Kaiser Hospital and left a message for Denise's supervisor, informing them she would be absent from work, following Matthew's instructions. The investigation also uncovered a disturbing video recorded by Matthew, showing him physically abusing Denise. After reviewing the evidence, the Vallejo police issued an apology to Denise and Aaron, acknowledging that they had initially believed the kidnapping story was fabricated. Denise and Aaron chose to sue the city of Vallejo, citing the mistreatment they endured during the investigation. The lawsuit ultimately resulted in a $2.5 million settlement, recognizing the errors made in handling the case. Matthew Muller was found guilty of kidnapping and in 2017 was sentenced to 40 years in prison. During his trial, Matthew expressed remorse for his actions and the suffering he caused. Following the kidnapping, Denise faced skepticism and was even accused of fabricating the incident. Ironically, Matthew, the perpetrator, came forward to defend her. He sent 2 anonymous letters to the media asserting that the kidnapping had indeed occurred. Denise also endured persistent nightmares and struggled to cope with the trauma. She waited until Matthew's conviction in 2017 before openly discussing the incident. Denise reported being held by multiple men, which Matthew corroborated by admitting he had accomplices, although he refused to reveal their identities. Aaron and Denise grew closer, got married, and had a child. They later co-authored a book titled Victory F, recounting the story of their experience. Moving on to the next case. Heather Maples. Everything changed on January 7, 2015, when Heather Maples failed to show up for work. Her lifeless body was found in her apartment, partially unclothed. Who had the right to take Heather Maples' life? Detectives faced a challenging investigation because Heather had no known enemies, and the motive for this crime remained unclear. Were it not for one small detail, Heather Maples' death could have remained unsolved, allowing the perpetrator to escape justice. On a typical morning at the real estate agency in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, on August 7, 2015, Kelsey Price arrived at work and began her usual tasks. Heather, her friend and colleague, was running late, which did not surprise Kelsey, as Heather was known for her lack of punctuality. Kelsey started calling Heather to wake her up, but received no answer. The previous night, Heather had planned to go to a bar with some friends and had asked Kelsey to come get her if she overslept or didn't answer her calls. Therefore, Kelsey wasn't concerned and went to Heather's apartment to wake her up. The girls' apartments were located in the same complex where they worked. Upon arriving, Kelsey found the front door unlocked. Entering easily, she saw her friend lying on the bed, sleeping on her stomach, wearing only a crop top and no underwear. Assuming Heather had a wild night, Kelsey tried to wake her, but there was no response. She then tapped Heather's foot, attempting to rouse her from her sleep, which no one would ever interrupt again. Heather's foot was so cold that Kelsey literally jumped back in horror at the realization of what had happened. In horror, Kelsey Price stepped out of the apartment and called 911. Emergency services soon arrived on the scene. Detective Tommy Massey was one of the first to reach the crime scene, and the forensic team meticulously examined the apartment. Heather was indeed partially undressed, with visible blows on her face. Her hair was soaked in blood, which was also splattered across the walls. It was clear she had been brutally beaten, tortured, and sexually assaulted. Massey and his colleague Detective Maples, coincidentally sharing Heather's surname, recalled this crime as a horrifying nightmare. That is understandable, as witnessing such a heart-wrenching scene is extremely difficult. Heather Nicole Maples was born on August 23, 1992, in Ocala, Florida. Her mother jokingly called Heather a hurricane baby. This nickname was entirely justified, as many envied the energy and courage that Heather possessed. In 2004, Jennifer Hunter gave birth to her second child. Heather welcomed her brother, Ryan, into her life with great joy. However, Ryan was later diagnosed with significant developmental delays, and the older sister, of her own accord, dedicated all her free time to him. She cared for him, happily spending time with him, teaching him to speak, walk, and eat independently. Heather was in the 7th grade at the time and devoted all the following years until graduation to Ryan, demonstrating immense love and dedication to her brother. At the age of 22, Heather Maples made the bold decision to leave her Texas home and begin a new chapter in Tennessee, pursuing her dream of becoming a psychologist. The journey began with a call from her former classmate, Chaz, inviting her to join him in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, where he was studying. According to him, it was the perfect place for Heather, a small college town where she could gain a great opportunity to prepare for college. Heather accepted, and in January 2015, the future student went to Chaz in Murfreesboro. By the way, their relationship soon turned romantic. A completely different life began for the girl. With the support of her best friend Kelsey, Heather found a job in the office of the residential complex where they lived. Maples was balancing work with her college preparations. Her friends and family supported her. Everything seemed to be going well. But soon her relationship with Chaz began to crumble, leading to a breakup, and Chaz moved away. At the beginning of August, she excitedly called her mother to share this wonderful news. She had been accepted to college. Her mother, filled with pride, was thrilled for Heather's achievement. However, a week later, Heather failed to show up for work, sparking concern and uncertainty. The detectives understood that considering the nature of the crime, it could have been related to Heather's personal life. At that point, most of her friends were considered suspects, and frankly speaking, there were reasons for that. Upon examining the apartment, there were no signs of forced entry, suggesting that Heather likely knew her attacker and possibly let them in herself. After a thorough investigation of the crime scene, several important pieces of evidence were discovered. Unknown DNA and a hair that did not belong to the victim. All of this was sent for analysis to identify the suspect. However, the most significant piece of evidence was a clear bloody fingerprint on the right side of Heather's bed. Detective Massey explained that if someone had deliberately dipped their finger in ink and intentionally left their mark, it wouldn't have been so clear and precise. Of course, this print was sent for analysis as well. Additionally, Heather's mobile phone was found in the apartment, but without the password, accessing its contents was impossible. This is where Kelsey came in handy. She played a crucial role, not only helping with the phone, but also deciding to inform Heather's mother of her death, believing it would be better coming from someone who loved and cared for Heather. Detective Massey hoped to get a lot of information about Heather from her friend Kelsey Price. He wanted to know everything about the victim's personal life, especially her relationship with Chaz. Kelsey told the detective that the relationship was quite tense, as Chaz had obvious anger management issues. Sometimes, he was too aggressive and cruel towards Heather, so the girl decided to end the relationship herself. Therefore, the police immediately decided to investigate Chaz. But an unexpected turn of events occurred. A young man named Michael was determined to access the crime scene despite the caution tape. He had keys to Heather's apartment. According to Michael, on the evening before her death, Heather called him and invited him for dinner, which he accepted. Immediately after dinner, Michael went home, unlike Heather, who went to a local bar with friends. But later, Heather reached out to Michael for help. As Michael recounted, Heather was in trouble. A young man named Ortavio was bothering her and was quite aggressive. Immediately after the incident, Michael offered to drive Heather home. As per his statement, it was around 2:30 in the morning on August 7th, the last time he saw Heather. Additionally, during the interrogation, Michael mentioned that Heather's front door should have been unlocked because he had her keys since she was dressed in a dress and didn't have pockets to carry them, and he simply forgot to return them after unlocking the door. Michael was very disappointed and did not seem like a liar at all, but investigators had to take his fingerprints and a DNA sample. They also contacted the bar to obtain surveillance footage, which confirmed everything Michael had said during the interrogation. Analysis confirmed that the fingerprints and DNA found at the crime scene did not match his. After Michael was cleared as a suspect, investigators turned their attention to the man who had been with Heather that night, Ortavio. With Kelsey's help in unlocking Heather's mobile phone, interest in Ortavio significantly increased. Detectives discovered that Heather had messaged Ortavio, a friend of hers, inviting him to her apartment just hours before she was found dead. Why did Heather call Ortavio to her home after Michael had saved her from him? The answer was simple. They were friends and became more persistent than usual at the bar. Heather was caught off guard. She wasn't prepared for this. Now the detectives needed to speak with Ortavio to get his side of the story. The detectives immediately realized that Ortavio was unaware of Heather's death. But what if he was somehow involved in this case? Meanwhile, the interrogation continued. Ortavio was shocked by what he heard. It seemed he genuinely didn't know what had happened to Heather. Following the interrogation, he willingly agreed to a DNA test, confident that it would clear his name. The results proved him right, as the DNA found at the crime scene did not match his, leading to his exclusion as a suspect. Without any leads, the detectives worked practically around the clock, reviewing surveillance footage, scrutinizing every detail provided by witnesses. On the 9th day of the investigation, as Detective Massey was preparing to leave the office late at night, he received a crucial call from one of the directors of the forensic laboratory. Massey finally got the answer regarding the bloody fingerprint that was lifted from Heather's bed. It belonged to a young man named Brandon Bowling, whose fingerprints were on file due to his employment at a company where he previously worked. It seemed that Brandon understood he was caught, but he continued to deny any involvement in Heather's death. After questioning, detectives requested a DNA test from Brandon, suggesting that if he was innocent, the test would prove it. Brandon did as he was asked, perhaps hoping to be released from police custody, but that did not happen. The investigators decided not to wait for the test results. The match of the fingerprint provided substantial grounds for the next step. The police immediately sent a request to the court for permission to access Brandon's phone, which could help the investigation confirm his movements, track calls, and texts on the night of the crime. However, they were unprepared for what they found on his phone after the court approval. The video from Brandon Bowling's phone was one of the most shocking, even to the most experienced detectives. In this video, the room of the corpse Heather was captured. Brandon recorded everything, from intimate acts to beatings. Heather was still alive at the time of the recording. In February 2018, Brandon Richmond Bowling pleaded guilty to the attack on Heather Maples. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison without the possibility of parole. On the day of the verdict, Heather's mother, Jennifer, made a speech that surprised many. When the trial ended in the corridor, Jennifer approached Bowling's mother. Jennifer simply hugged this woman, saying that they both lost their children that day. Unfortunately, Brandon Bowling never explained his motives. What are your thoughts on this? What do you think Brandon's motive was, if there was one? Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing cold cases with me. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cold Case Mystique for more deep dives into cold case investigations. Your support helps me bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like me to cover next. See you in the next video. And remember, the search for truth never stops.